What's up, guys? This was a highly requested video. The A56, a $400 mid-range phone versus the $1,300 S25 Ultra. How far have these mid-range phones come these days? I think you guys will actually be surprised in some of these categories. But let's go ahead and just jump in. So let's go ahead and actually start off with that. Hardware on these mid-range phones have actually gotten really good to the point where if you hand somebody an A56, you would think that, you know, if you told them you paid $700 just based on hardware, how this phone looks from the back and how it feels, they probably believe you. It is very, very nice looking. It's a glass and metal phone just like the S25 Ultra. Some of the differences here is that the S25 Ultra uses a titanium build, so it's pretty light for the size. And then also you do have the built-in S Pen, which got a lot of controversy this year because they took out the Bluetooth capability. So now the S Pen is kind of like, I don't know, it's really flimsy and it doesn't have the Bluetooth capability. But for anybody who's in a digital artwork or just wants to navigate with the pen, it is there, but it does not have the same functionality, so it's not as useful anymore to be able to skip songs and stuff like that. But yeah, guys, the A56 hardware wise, it feels really good compared to the S25. I think that's probably the most impressive thing about the hardware here. And also another thing is the IP rating. So the A56 is IP67 versus the IP68 on the S25. So it does have a better water resistant rating. All right, so how does a flagship display compare to Samsung's mid-range display? Well, it's really not too bad of a difference here, but you do have a few little bells and whistles on the S25 that kind of make it stand out. For sure is the actual bezels here. So as you guys can see, the A56 has some pretty chunky bezels even for today's standard, and I'm pretty sure Samsung does this on purpose so you can kind of tell the difference between these two phones, because if they made the bezels pretty slim on the A56, because most people won't be able to tell the differences with the displays because they look pretty close in terms of just quality, right? But there are definitely some differences if you look here. But the S25, besides having those super slim bezels, it has a bigger 6.9-inch display. But you guys can see, you would think the phone would be a lot bigger. It's because the bezels are just super slim. But yeah, so it's dynamic LTPO, which will help with battery life, and then it's also 120 Hz HDR10 plus, and it does get much brighter at 2600 nits, and it's a 1440p panel. So if you pull up some 1440p content, you will be able to tell the difference for sure. It's 498, and then it also has something that a lot of people may not notice, but it has the anti-reflection coating here. So as you guys can see how the light is really aggressive on the A56 compared to the S25. So this definitely helps outside with reflection. So it's one of those like little flagship features that you really appreciate once you get it. But yeah, so that is one thing that you'll notice. And the glass is much stronger. It's a Gorilla Glass Armor 2. Now the A56 display really isn't bad. It's the Super AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus. It's 1900 nits peak brightness, and it is also 1080p 385 for the PPI. The display, as far as the quality, is not as tough as the S25's display, but it's still a really good screen for the most part. I think most people will be happy with the A56 display here. It's not, the colors aren't as good because it's Samsung's older panel. But besides that, it's actually a pretty good display, guys. This is the part that will impress a lot of you guys. So as you can see, we got Geekbench 6 here. Let's talk about these specs a little bit. We have Samsung's Exynos processor on the A56 is the 1580 processor, 128 gigs and 8 gigs of RAM on this model. Android 15 is 6 years of major OS updates you will get with the A56. And then we have, Samsung, the best processor out right now is the Snapdragon 8 Elite processor. This has 512 gigs and 12 gigs of RAM on here, and you guys can see the big score difference here. But what will throw a lot of people off is that One UI 7, so this is the big thing here with the A56. One UI 7 is so good with animations and being consistent that it pretty much feels on par with the S25 Ultra, which I think is pretty impressive. I think that's the most amazing thing about this phone here. Now, when it comes to like general app loading, you will definitely notice a difference. The S25 is just a little bit quicker here, but it's not like to the point where it's like dramatic. But What's more impressive is the actual animations. And this is the thing that is really cool with the A56 and just One UI 7 in general. The animations are still really good on the A56 and everything is still very smooth. So they feel the same when it comes to general uses. But if for more power users, you'll notice the difference. But I'm saying for general usage, this is very good. The A56 feels consistently smooth when you're just doing normal stuff. Like swiping down, this feels exactly the same. So a few years ago, you could easily tell the difference between like a mid-range phone, especially when you started loading a lot of stuff up or bouncing in and out of applications. You would see like these little animation lags and stutters, but we're not seeing that with the A56. It's very smooth. So as you guys can see. So yeah, it's not as quite, it's fast when it comes to general app loading, but everything else feels on par with each other. That's been my favorite thing about this phone so far. And it's not like it's like super far off in terms of loading stuff up. Just keep opening apps, and you guys can see just how consistently smooth it still is. So I think Samsung did a fantastic job with One UI 7. It is taking a while for it to come out for these older devices and stuff like that. I think it's still not out for the S24 series, but they're saying that they really want to get it right. So I've been impressed with it. So now, if you are a more power user, you can see the difference here in 3D. Mark is pretty big. We're getting 36 frames versus 8 frames, and as you guys can see here, the frames 17 to 49, 6 to 10. So if you're doing more intense stuff on your phone, then you'll definitely notice the speed. Like if we're rendering a video, it'll take way longer on the A56 than on the S25 here. And just stuff like that. And also gaming performance here we'll show you guys, which actually is not as bad as you think on these mid-range phones. Now the difference with gaming performance here is it's a big difference depending on what kind of gamer you are. So obviously a more competitive gamer, you have better settings. You can play PUBG at 120 frames and you could definitely feel that difference. No heating issues on the S25, no real issues at all. Genshin, stuff like that, Call of Duty is gonna play much better, and the consistency with the frame rates. Now for a more casual gamer, the A56 is fine. Really, I don't really have an issue with this phone. Now you can't play at 120 frames or 90 frames. It's only 60 frames. But for people who are not really into gaming, or you just come in here, you just want to play PUBG, a match or two, Call of Duty, this is not bad at all. And I haven't had any heating problems with this Exynos processor at all either. So I think that the gaming performance is perfectly fine on the A56. It's actually been pretty surprising for the most part. But yeah, so if you are someone who's not really into the gaming like that, then this is perfectly fine if you just want to blow some time, right? So there are some differences with the software here. So you do have Galaxy AI on the S25, but you have intelligent features on the A56, which is basically a stripped back version of Galaxy AI. So the object eraser is here, best face is here, custom filters, auto trim, AI select, and then you also have your circle to search. So you do have AI features here, you just don't have stuff like live translation like you would find on the S25 with the writing assist, as you guys can see. But you do have, a little bit of AI features that, I think a lot of people would use, like the object eraser and best face. But yeah, if you wanted like the more AI features, then it's not going to be here. Now there are some other stuff that you can do, like you can just download like ChatGPT and other AI apps. But for the most part, it's not going to be built into the phone. That's one of the differences. And also Samsung desktop support, which you may or may not care about, but it's basically, this is like a power user feature, so you can essentially just have a desktop experience while using your S25. So if you have an external display, you could turn it into like a little computer. That's something that the A56 does not have. But besides that, software-wise, they're very similar for the most part. Now, when it comes to these speakers here, I got both speakers at max volume. Let's go ahead and start with the A56. So this is a pretty much a night and day difference here. It's a massive difference when it comes to not only how loud the speaker gets on the S25, but the actual quality is a lot cleaner. The bass is a lot louder and cleaner, so it's just an overall better speaker. That's a clear difference that you could see very easily. As far as the fingerprint scanner goes, you do have a difference in fingerprint scanner. So this one is a very small thing, but again, it's kind of like, again, one of those flagship features. The S25 has the ultrasonic one, so it's a little bit faster than the A56 optical one. You kind of have to hold it a little bit. It's not too bad. You just hold it. It's not that bad. But yeah, the S25 is going to feel just a little bit quicker. And you also do have face unlock on both of these as well if you don't want to use a fingerprint at all. Alright, so let's talk about the photo and image quality. Are these mid-range phones, are they getting kind of close to these flagship photos? Let me know what you guys think. And we have a 200 megapixel sensor on the S25. Then we also have a 10 megapixel telephoto, that's 3 times. And then we have another 50 megapixel periscope telephoto, that's 5 times. And we get all the way up to 100 times zoom on here. We also do have a 50 megapixel ultra wide camera now, 8K 24 and 30 video with a 12 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. Now the A56 here, it does have a 50 megapixel standard on here, and also does have a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and also does have a macro camera on here that 5 megapixels. So there's no telephoto lens, so all the zoom you see is going to be digital zoom, and you'll be able to see that throughout the comparison. It's 4K 60, or sorry, 4K 30, and then you also have a 12 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. Check out the photos and video. Let me know what you guys think. Alright, so this is an area where I think Samsung definitely should improve, is the charging speeds. Both of these phones actually have 45-watt charging. So my prediction is that since Samsung put this in the A56 45 watts, we should be getting faster charging with the S26, hopefully. But yeah, they actually charge at the same speeds. Now, the difference here is that you do have wireless and reverse wireless charging on the S25 with Qi 2 as well, so you can use the magnetic cases and stuff like that. But besides that, the battery life is actually very good on the A56. I had 0 issues. They actually both have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery on here. So that was also another complaint with the S25, is that it didn't use the newer battery tech. So, that's unfortunate, but the battery life is excellent on the S25, but it's also very good on this A56 as well. So for me, they feel pretty similar. I can get through the day with these phones, regardless of what I'm doing. So I've just been pretty impressed with the A56 here. And like I always say, a lot of people, you don't need a spend $1,200 on a phone. I think a lot of these mid-range phones are pretty good. You guys know I love old flagships, so I would just spend the $400. get a Galaxy S23 Plus. But for people who don't want to buy in the, used refurbished marketplace and stuff like that, then I get it. But yeah, these mid-range phones are pretty nice these days. So what do you guys think?